What up, y'alls? Y'all doing alright? Y'all better be, because y'all gonna get some knowledge. Because y'all be y'allin' be. Y'all act like y'all. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Does that fucking make sense to you? Motherfucker. Motherfucker. Hey guys, guess what? Last section of the fucking book. Section V, whatever number that is. Is that 5? I don't know. And this shall be our shortest yet. And then we can actually get into the fucking book proper, as it were. A synthetical system of intellect. Okay, so let me just stop right here. It's called Systems of Philosophy. A synthetical system of intellectual philosophy has for its object, first, a complete enumeration of all the primary elements of our knowledge, and secondly, the expansion of these simple elements into all the multiplicity of our ideas and conceptions, however varied and complicated they may appear. Philosophical systems, therefore, will differ amongst themselves accordingly as they hold up any one of those 3 fundamental ideas which we have deduced most prominently to our view, and make it either the chief or sole element from which all other ideas are derived. Systems of philosophy have accordingly ever taken 3 great directions, corresponding to the 3 fundamental ideas, upon one or other of which they have severely been founded. That's a weird way to say that. These 3 primary directions of philosophic spirit we must first of all elucidate, and then show others the secondary directions which arise from them. The most vivid and striking fact of our consciousness are unquestionably those which are termed sensations. To them, the mind is sure at first to bend its attention, and as the progress of investigation goes on, it discovers an immense multitude of notions over and above our simple perceptions, the germ of which must undoubtedly be traced to the sensational faculty. Physical science, for example, in all its branches and every kind of knowledge, indeed, that is corrected with the object of the eternal world, arises directly from the analysis, classification, and general investigation of those numberless materials which come through the channel of our sensations. So far, the process of what we shall term the sensational philosophy is perfectly legitimate and correct, and has given rise for the first time to splendid results. Many philosophic people, however, absorbed in the multitude, the variety, and the grandeur of the fruits of physical science, have lost sight of everything else, have made the sense of sole foundation of human knowledge, and built up a whole metaphysical system upon the basis of external nature. Such, in fact, was the philosophy of French encyclopedists, such in tendency was the philosophy of Locke. A precisely contrary direction, on the other hand, has arisen from a too close and partial analysis of self. In this analysis, our volitions, our desires, and the subjective laws of our reason and intelligence were very properly and plainly separated from the whole region of sensation. But after a time, when attention became entirely concentrated upon the inherited powers of the individual mind, the external world itself was made to depend upon its subjective laws. And there resulted a whole philosophical system based upon one notion of self, which is naive and exhaustless energies. Such is idealism, true and beautiful in its results, so long as it investigates what are, properly speaking, the innate faculties of the human mind, but false and delusive when it would go a step too far, and draw from within what a more accurate philosopher shows to arise from an objective world around us. Such, in its fullest extent, was the philosophy of Berkeley in England and of Fichte in Germany. Such in its tendencies was Kantism, and such in its first and better movement was a system with which Dr. Reid honored and enlightened his country. The third element of our intellectual life remains that, namely, which appears under the variety forms of substantial, the eternal, the immeasurable, the infinite, in a word, the idea of being itself, in which the finite mind and finite nature are both equally grounded. And accordingly, we look around now for a philosophy which answers to this fundamental notion. What then, we inquire, must necessarily be the character of such philosophy, when the world of phenomena is sunk in the profounder idea of substance, when the variety phases of our own consciousness are lost in the depths of being per se, when subject and object are both absorbed into one prior and eternal principle, the temporal lost in the eternal, the finite in the infinite. The philosophy has been realized in different forms under one idea of pantheism. Such in the ancient world was substantially the doctrine of Elletics. Such in modern times was the doctrine of Spinoza. And such, in a more refined and perfect form, are now the respective philosophies of Schelling and Hegel. You know, it's funny, I've never heard of any of these fucking people, but we might find out soon. As, however, the pantheistic scheme is properly idealistic, inasmuch as the material world is virtually denied, we may induce or include the two later of the three systems I have pointed out under the general term of idealism. And if we wish to make a distinction between them, we may term the one subjective idealism, that which absorbs everything in the subject, the me, and the other objective idealism, or the doctrine which reduces everything to one infinite, unchangeable, objective substance or being, of which and in which all things consist. I'll throw up. In this way, we shall have simply two main tendencies in philosophy, that of sensationalism on the one hand and idealism on the other. Do you want to go into that a little bit more? The footnotes of that? Holy Christmas, let's go. This is talking about the tendencies between sensationalism and then idealism, I think. An acute writer in the Perspective Review has expressed surprise that I should include the two categories of the me and the absolute under the one title of idealism. I remark in reply to his observations, and the classification is a matter of convenience, and not at all intended, as he supposed, to merge the two ideas into one. The terms subjective and objective idealism have long been applied to these two movements, so that I am merely retaining the well-known phraseology of the German schools. The reason of my retaining of the classification is this, that in our common philosophical language, sensations and ideas represent two great sources of our knowledge. We have an outward source, nature, and an inward source, pure ideas, which terminate on the side of will in itself, on the side of reason and God. Sensationalism, accordingly, is philosophically built upon the former. Subjective and objective idealism is that built upon the two latter. To say that the proper association of the absolute is with the not me either throws a category of me into a false position by making it opposed to the absolute in a sense in which nature is not opposed to it, or commits the same error which is wrongly attributed to myself, namely that of throwing the two distinct terms, nature and the absolute, under one category, that of the not me. And yet a little further on it is proposed to deduce the absolute, alike from the me and the not me, when viewed not as a cause but a condition. To associate the absolute with the not me, and then to deduce it immediately from both categories together, appears to me an instance of unaccountable simplicity, at least equal to that which the writer attributes to myself in uniting the me and the not me under the head of idealism. If I have not caught his meaning, I must plead an excuse, and his style seems expressly adapted to hide the thought behind the dazzling brilliance of ornamental illumination. That's like one of those fucking people. I just want a little side note here, that when they have their little video on YouTube, and then someone says something in the channel, and then they go into a long paragraph of like, well, let me tell you, I fucking despise that, and that's what I just read. So that was stupid. Anyway, so he basically said, yeah, sensationalism on the one hand, idealism on the other. Blah, blah, blah. That the philosophic spirit, however, should remain content with the struggles of the two opposite schools, both giving opposite conclusions and both running into extravagant results, was a thing in its nature impossible. The contradictions thus thrown up to view naturally give rise to a critical philosophy, the object of which is examined to the grounds and pretensions of every other system to check the progress and arraign the conclusions of dogmaticism, and get near to the truth in denying and overturning the false. The philosophy which thus aims at detecting falsehoods without attempting to build up any system of truth we term skepticism. Not that contemplatable species of skepticism which are practiced by some is nothing more than a secret abhorrent of human reason and a disguised misanthropy, but that which honestly aims at truth by meaning of exposing error wherever it may lurk. As in the case of sensationalism and idealism, therefore, so also in skepticism there is a good side, und a bad. The one seeking to establish truth by separating from it all untruth, the other seeking to lay truth as well as error alike prostrate at the foot of an obstinate and irrational unbelief. Such then is the natural result of struggle between an extreme sensationalism on the one hand and the extreme idealism on the other. The skepticism, however, should be a culminating point on the philosophic spirit, and that the human mind should rest satisfied with the ultimate conclusion, that the highest wisdom is to doubt, were altogether inconceivable. Skeptical philosophy may be invaluable as an instrument, which helps us on the road to truth by dissipating the fond delusions, but the mind can only repose at the last in positive, or as we may term them, dogmatical results. Almost done, y'all. What then is the next step to which the human mind advances after sensationalism, idealism, and skepticism has exhausted their resources and left it in doubt? The resource, we answer, in which the mind last of all takes refuge is mysticism. Reason and reflection have apparently put forth all their power and ended in uncertainty. The mystic thereupon rises to view and says to the rest of the philosophic motherfuckers around him, ye have all alike mistaken the road. Ye have sought for truth from a totally incorrect source, and entirely overlooked the one divine element within you, from which alone it can be derived. Reason is imperfect. It halts and stumbles at every step when it would penetrate into the deeper recesses of pure and absolute truth. But look within you. Is there not a spiritual nature there that allies you with the spiritual world? Is there not an enthusiasm which arises in all its energies when reason grows calm and silent? Is there not a light that envelops all the faculties? If you would only give yourself up to your better feelings and listen to the voice of God that speaks and stirs within, this is all one question. To this source, then, the mystic looks for a knowledge that far transcends the feeble results of our reflective faculty, and in which he would lay the basis of the highest and truest philosophy. In mysticism, however, as well as in other systems I have adduced, there is undoubtedly a mixture of truth and error. It is quite possible, amidst the cold abstractions of reason, to lose sight of that inward impulse which shows itself in the flashes of genius, in the spontaneous efforts of the imagination, and in the ardent aspirations of man's religious faculty. Every part of our intellectual life, we must remember, develops itself in its free and spontaneous, as well as it does in its conscious and reflective moments. And often the efforts of our spontaneous being have in them greater freshness and vigor than those of our calmer and more reflective. The benefits, then, which we owe to mysticism are that it recalls our attention again and again to the spontaneous working of our highest faculties. That is, it points out to us the lofty emotions which this working often gives rise, that it withdraws us from absorbing our whole attention in logical forms and processes, and points out to us the real and veritable existence of a spiritual world with which we are all closely connected, to whose laws we are all subjected, and without which our higher reason, our instinctive faith, and our fondest aspirations would be mockery and delusion. On the other hand, mysticism is perhaps the readiness of all philosophies to fall into abuse and to run into endless extravagance. Once let the enthusiastic element absorb the reflective, or an implicit faith be responded in our inner sensibility, and no bounds are sufficient to mark out the delusions to which we become subject, and the wild extravagance to which the mind will regain itself. Once establish the principle that implicit credence must be given to feeling in its varied impulse, and every strong inward suggestion may become the whispering of celestial being. Every vivid idea the appearance of some vision from another world, and the natural impulses of an energetic soul become soon transformed into the ravagings of religious fanaticism. Such is mysticism in its nature and origin, and such also both in its delirious results. In reviewing the progress of these four philosophical tendencies, we cannot fail to make the observation that they all owe their origin to some correct idea, and all succeed in eliciting some fragment of the truth that would otherwise, in all probability, have been either neglected or concealed. This consideration lies at the foundation of another school of philosophy which may follow one or another to these four directions, as the case may be to a certain extent, but which, seeing in them all only the different movements of the human reason as it progresses towards the unfolding of truth, rejects in each one that which may appear extravagant or incorrect, and builds up the residuum of truth, from whatever source derives, into a new and more complete system. Such is briefly the birth and the aim of eclecticism, a school of philosophy which, though modest in its pretensions and tolerant in its tone, is singularly extensive in its researches and safe in its results. Listen to how funny this next part is. With this brief review of philosophical tendencies which obtains in our own age, as they have more or less in every other, we shall be better enabled to observe and to estimate their various manifestations in the last 2 or 3 centuries, and better prepared to mark generally the characteristics and tendencies of speculative philosophy in these our days. Done. That was, from the beginning, the first fucking video, to right now, 72 pages of introduction. Introducing us to philosophy in general, which honestly is pretty good. You know, like, I'll bitch about it because it's a little pretentious at times, but what the writer of this, I didn't read the preface, by the way. The preface alone was like, oh boy. What does that mean? XXI. Whatever that number is, that's just the preface. I didn't read that. Or did I? I don't really remember. Maybe I did read it. Who knows these things? Now, the writer is J.D. Morrell. I know nothing of J.D. Morrell. By the way, I still haven't fixed it. I just haven't gotten to it. I know nothing of this person. But with the fact that he's introduced us to so many concepts of, like, possibly where philosophy comes from in its progression, and the different tendencies that are within philosophy, and the ideas of different understandings of what faith has to do with it, or what skepticism is, and all this and that. Like, it was laid out before us. Before we get into studying true what is philosophy of the 19th century, I can't remember because the cover's not even there anymore. So, of whatever century that is, the 1800s, I'm thinking, it did set it up pretty well. All in all, you know what I mean? From this point, we can actually get into the fucking meat of this. And it's a little, I'm hoping it kind of, I mean, I don't know, we'll see. Because the first part is on the proximate sources of the philosophic, on the proximate sources of the philosophy of the 19th century, part 1. Chapter 1. On the progress of sensationalism from the period of Bacon to the commencement of the 19th century. So we get to learn a little bit about Bacon. I've heard the name, actually, and I have this. So Francis, I don't know if it's Sir Francis, but Francis Bacon. I do have a book about Francis Bacon here. Selected writings of Francis Bacon. You know what's hilarious though? Edited by Hugh G. Dick. Hugh G. Dick. I don't know, I thought it was funny. But anyway, this is the person from which it starts. And so it's like, is this the beginnings of modern philosophy? Francis Bacon? Well, someone that knows philosophy really well is like, are you seriously asking that question? But someone like me, who doesn't know anything about philosophy, has no fucking clue. I have not a clue of this. But if anybody's wondering, it says serendipity in the back. Handwritten. Whoa, okay. Because of the thing that I was reading earlier that you don't even know about. Whoa. You'll never know why that was exciting for me. Anyway, so... That's weird. Francis Bacon, beginning of this philosophic movement? Because we already know about the pre-stuff, Plato and Aristotle and all them motherfuckers and all that. But we don't really know why. So we're going to begin with Bacon. But before we begin with Bacon, we're going to read this. Oh my God, dude. Just pain and suffering. Tacitus, Nikolai. Yeah, guys, I don't know. Nobody likes this dead time. Yes, so there you go. We're going to move on to chapter 1 next, which shall be exciting to read.